June 1, 2018. For music journalists of a certain vintage, a dull but terrifying unease often greets invitations from pop stars to fly somewhere special to spend time with them. We are 6 years out from the Rihanna plane disaster, a promotional experiment that forced a gaggle of writers to follow her first-class life around as they were stuck in sub-economy purgatory, waiting for a fleeting glimpse of the star. Just last year, the Fyre Festival became an iconic debacle when, after being lured out by the likes of performers including Lil Yachty and organizer Ja Rule, fans and journalists were marooned in the Bahamas with only turkey sandwiches to eat and no way home. And almost every writer out there has a scary story about a time they covered some random festival in some random place with some random disaster as its sad punctuation. And yet Kanye West's brand, especially in 2018, is disorientation, so when he invited me and a number of other journalists, celebrities, and industry types to fly to Wyoming to hear his new album Ye in the state in which it was recorded, it somehow made chaotic sense. Many of us were only invited a day before we were set to leave and given absolutely no information as to what to expect. I did not even know what time I needed to be at the airport until late the night before. As of this writing, I am still unclear when I will be heading back home. There was no itinerary of what would or once would arrive, no hotel information, no schedule of events. At the airport, a small private terminal in New York's JFK reserved for chartered flights, about 100 people sat on top of the luggage in a state of stupor staring at the phones. The employees of the private airline were unwilling or unable to even tell us when the plane would finally take off. In that moment, a vague terror began to wash over me that this could be a nightmare and, given Kanye's recent mood, that the nightmare itself might be the goal in some sadistic way. Of course, adding to the chaos is that this is not a normal time in Kanye land, which is really saying something considering how abnormal much of his career has been. He has, of course, received flack for comments made about Donald Trump and slavery, and for the first time maybe in his entire career, you can feel a line actually being crossed in even his most loyal fans, with many unsure of what to make of an artist they grew up with, who many feel is almost family. Has spouted ideas that are at best interpreted as confused and misguided, and at worst as hateful and dangerous. There were, as far as I could make out, hushed conversations around me about the state of his persona. I wasn't the only one worrying. Except the trip wasn't a disaster, and actually, the ride was quite comfortable. Inside the jet, which held around 70 people, was one big first class filled with buttery brown leather seats that reclined. We ate LA's potato chips and roast beef sandwiches wrapped in plastic, not exactly food you'd imagine Kanye or his wife Kim Kardashian eating themselves, but hardly the pathetic fare seen at Fyre Festival. The plane was filled with a random assortment, skinny kids in Raf Simons Adidas shoes who made the older flight attendants worry. I overheard that they should have carded everyone on board to make sure the bountiful wine was being given legally. The stylish visual artist Lucian Smith and a few cool members of the avant-garde jazz group Onyx Collective, and some more conventional folks who looked like they could have worked for Kanye's label, Def Jam, or Adidas, which owns his Yeezy brand. And by the time we landed, the confusion of Kanye West started to again feel like a strength, at least in the moment. We pulled into a tiny airport in Jackson Hole surrounded by white-capped mountains and fields for as far as eyes could see. There is something beautifully surreal, beautifully Kanye, in fact, about seeing a young man, as I did, in a black balaclava pulled over his head, a black leather off-white trench coat draped over his body, and a clear plastic briefcase walk down the stairs to step out onto a Wyoming tarmac. There has been talk these days about red state and blue state bubbles, but here, surely, was about as strange a mingling of the two as I could ever imagine. A hypebeast ensconced in pine trees and rolling hills wearing Martin Margiela. The wildlife of Wyoming went about the day near Kanye's listening event. Photo by Alex Frank. We boarded a bus to go to our hotels, and a friendly driver wearing a bolo tie warned us that it gets pretty darn chilly up here when the sun goes down. "You got Uber up here," someone yelled from the back of the bus. "Barely," the driver said as he drove over picturesque streams. Jackson Hole is a tiny town of around 10,000. There are only about 500,000 in the entire state, but it is certainly a moneyed place, a fancy ski resort with cowboy stores as well as shops advertising Swarovski crystals. Seems like the kind of place where you go to spend a lot of money to feel rustic without having to be rustic. As we sailed through the town, we asked the driver where tonight's album listening would be, and all he'd say was, "Some ranch up north." That ranch is called Diamond Cross, and it is marked by endless waves of trees and yellow dandelions. At first, it seemed like some pristine, almost corny place sprung from a Ralph Lauren fantasy. A giant barn-like structure loomed above a group of horses alongside men in cowboy hats ready to ride them, as fire pits burned brightly, and teams of people assembled s'mores. Then, Blood on the Leaves, the track from Yeezus that samples Nina Simone's version of Strange Fruit, a song about lynching, began to blast from speakers set up throughout the space, and the Kanye divide split open again. This is what she represents to us now all at once, a symbol of unparalleled wealth and power who is still somehow provocative on issues of race and class and gender. I quickly spotted the first notable face of the evening, Candace Owens, the black conservative commentator and Trump supporter who indirectly sparked this latest bout of Kanye controversy by being the focus of his admiration on Twitter. The day was still bright and guests were lounging in the sun, and I asked her what she made of Kanye's current contradictions. "Why can't you say you love Donald Trump? Why can't you say that?" she asked rhetorically, well practiced in this line of questioning. He liked Trump before he went into politics, and now he has to shut it off because he's black. I asked her if and how she thought Kanye changed the conversation about art and celebrity and race and politics today. "Artists are expected to be liberal, but there is an underground railroad of conservatives in Hollywood," she said. "People are worried they will get excommunicated," and he made people understand that they aren't alone. Before I let her go and enjoy the vodka lemonades and chicken wings that were being served, I told her that I disagree with about everything she stands for in her entire life. "And that's okay," she said. "That's what's missing in this country, people who disagree, having a conversation." I then found someone with a different kind of love for Kanye, the actor Jonah Hill. He's the one person who I have an unending childhood kind of fascination with. "I still look at him like I'm a little kid, and he's a superstar," he said, echoing, I imagine, why many people have remained loyal. "When I decided to come here, I thought, it's like if someone got to hear Thriller in the middle of Wyoming." Kanye and Kim played host to Jonah Hill during the party. Photo by Alex Frank. I walked into the barn, which had started to fill up with what looked like a few hundred people milling about, drinking drinks and eating the mac and cheese served buffet-style from a sterno plate. Along with all the out-of-towners, Kanye had also invited some locals, and one man told me that he landed an invite through working at the hotel where Kanye was staying. Eventually, Chris Rock, 2 Chainz, with his little dog, Trappy, on Elisha Nas, and the man himself showed up. Kanye held a tumbler glass of brown liquor served neat and bounced around like a good host with a big smile, saying hello and giving out bear hugs. People took photos of him, and also videos. Kim arrived wearing what her stylist said was custom Kanye merch made just for the event, a neon pink tee. I snapped a secret pic of her, and her big, bearded bodyguard shot me a mean look. I immediately felt a little icky. Celebrity is a weird thing. Even if you fancy yourself cynical and jaded, like I do, fame's glow will shine in your eyes anyway, and however you've been feeling about a certain person and their art can fade in the floodlight that is star power. It was time to finally listen to Ye, and an announcement was made for us to go out by the bonfire. By now, it was dark out and the fire had grown. We stood in a circle, and Chris Rock gave a toast. It's great to be out here in Wyoming. I saw a moose. I touched a moose, and the moose said, "Hey, there's a lot of NS here," he joked. Hope you enjoy the bonfire tonight because tomorrow night it'll be a cross burning. Then he got in more philosophical. Remember that rap music, hip-hop music, is the first art form created by free black men, and no black man has taken more advantage of his freedoms than Kanye West. I wasn't sure if taking advantage was meant as a compliment or a slight. Maybe it was both. And then the album began, which is why we were here in this unlikely state, where it is said cows outnumber humans, in the first place. It boomed, the only noise for miles in such an open space. Kanye seemed to be enjoying himself, jumping around. Kim stood close and quiet, bobbing her head but overshadowed by the boisterousness around her. By now, you may have heard the music and decided if it is enough for you to forgive Kanye for whatever it is you might be mad at him about, if you are in fact mad at him at all. But at such a joyous party, it was glaring to hear him open the record by rapping of murder and depression and suicide and drugs. He sang the blues on this first song, but neither the beat nor the way he danced made it feel earnest. And that's the rub after all, the confusion that is being a Kanye fan in 2018, joy and despair, violence and exuberance. Bumped right up next to each uncomfortably, and you're not sure which matters most or if they can coexist peacefully anymore. That's a decision we all have to make on our own. I certainly haven't made up my mind. These are songs to dance to surely. Kanye in a soulful, playful mood in at least his production style, but with the glow of the fire warm on my face, a long weird day behind me, I couldn't tell if I felt all that much like dancing along with everyone else. I just stood there, smiling and swaying, wondering when my chartered jet would take me home. Back to home.